Praise his great name. All right. We bless the Most High. This time we want to prepare ourselves for our class. I want to say shalom to each one of you that are joining us by live stream. For those who are joining us for the first time, I want to welcome you to School of Messiah Bible Institute. And our class that we are in, our course rather, that we are in, is Biblical World History. Today we're going to be dealing with lesson number 8. We're going to be looking at the wilderness experience of the house of Israel. We're going to be looking at Joshua and the period of the judges of Israel. Last week, we covered the development of Israel being a covenant people. That was our focus, where we looked at how Elohim brought our ancient Israelite ancestors out of Egyptian captivity and brought them into the wilderness so that they would enter into covenant with the Almighty. We had talked about how not only were there blood-descended Israelites that were a part of this covenant, but also there were a mixed multitude of people. So there were people who were of different ethnicities, in particular of Egypt, Ethiopia, of the Kenizzites, and possibly others that were in the land of Egypt at that time. But the point that I wanted to convey is that from the beginning of the house of Israel being a covenant people, they began as a multi-ethnic people. We know that the larger population of the house of Israel were indeed blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We know that. But because we have this evidence of there being a mixed multitude, it teaches us that Elohim does not exclude anyone who chooses to come to him in faith and to attach themselves to his people. He accepts everyone. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us to know about the Almighty. It's a good thing to know that he is not just an Elohim to one particular ethnic group of people. It was never Elohim's intent for him to only have an ethnic group and that's it. The intent of Elohim is that he would have a covenant people. And the way he chose to develop his covenant people is through the descendants of Abraham. Now, Elohim is sovereign about whatever he wants to do. This is the way he chose to develop the covenant people. And I like to emphasize these things so that, first of all, we don't ever feel as though we are better than other people. And also that we want to present an accurate picture of our Elohim. And painting an accurate picture of our Elohim is based upon noting what is revealed in the scriptures. And of course, I don't have no problem with stating whatever the scriptures have to state about the Creator, even if at times it may make Elohim look biased. Because from a biblical perspective, in many things, Elohim is very biased. But he is the Creator, and he can be whatever he wants to be. So by no means am I about the business of trying to paint a picture of the Creator that's going to suit all people if it is not the case. He is sovereign. He does what he wants to do. Now, as we get into this lesson, let's begin with a word of prayer and then dive right into what we're going to be covering today. Father, bless your great name. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to share and to provide this teaching and offer this history to your disciples. I pray that you would give them wisdom and insight, that they would learn from you, and that you would be glorified. Help us to understand your sovereignty as we go through this history. And may your great name be praised. In the mighty name of Yahshua. Amen. Amen. Now, as I noted, we left off last week dealing with the house of Israel entering into a covenant. And at the time that the covenant was initiated through Moses, through Moshe, the house of Israel was in the wilderness. That's their location. That's where they were. They were in the wilderness. After the covenant had been made, the next thing on the agenda was to go to the borders of Canaan. When they got to the borders of Canaan, there were spies that Moses sent to go into the land of Canaan and to bring back a report about what was in the land, the people in the land, the vegetation of the land, to go and find out if indeed the land that Elohim said was a blessed land was so. So they called for the tribal chieftains of the 12 tribes of Israel. These tribal chieftains go into the land of Canaan to spy it out. After they spy out the land, they come back and bring a report to Moshe. The report that they brought to Moshe, for the most part, was true as far as what they described about the land and the people. The people were described as giants, large people, and the fruit of the land was described as being very hardy. Now, 10 of the spies did not feel that the land could be overtaken. However, there were 2 of the spies, and the 2 were common individuals, common names, familiar names that we know, Joshua and Caleb. these two spies were in agreement with what Elohim had declared. Elohim had said, I'm going to give you this land. You're to go in and possess the land. So Joshua and Caleb had faith to trust Elohim that despite the giants that lived in the land, despite what may seem to be a very difficult task, their faith in Elohim being with Israel is what they stood upon. But because 10 of them basically said, no, you know, the people of the land are too large. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. Mm-hmm. It caused things to shift. I want you to think about this. This is a part of the history of our ancient ancestors. And once they arrived at the borders of the land of Canaan, the intent of Elohim was that they would immediately go into the land. Can y'all see that? That was the intent. That came to this area called Kadesh Barnea. And because the 10 who did not believe that they could go in and possess the land had a negative report. And because they were chieftains, mind you, these chieftains were over the tribes. So they would go back into their tribes and then they would influence the people. You know, I mean, think about it. If you have a leader and your leader says, well, I don't think we can do it. People are too big, you know, and they have more people than we do. I don't think we can do it. I don't think we're ready. So coming with that kind of a report, first of all, the report was brought back to Moses, but also they brought that report to their own people. So the people in the tribes, when they heard the report, they also began to align themselves with the view that their chieftain had. So you had the majority of Israelites not believing that they could go and possess the land. So this caused things to go in a different direction. It was never the intent of the Almighty for the children of Israel to remain in the wilderness. Their unbelief caused the whole house of Israel to be in the wilderness for 40 years. All because of one thing, and that was unbelief. Unbelief. Mm-hmm. So, after they spy out the land, they come back with a report. I mean, if it was a majority that believed, things might not have gone the way that they went. But you had 10 with the negative report, 2 with the positive report. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you have a majority of people that don't believe, it is very difficult to get things done. Mm-hmm. And it's true. Unbelief is a very, very powerful thing. Just as a side note, the scriptures teach us that when Yahshua was here, as many miracles as he performed, as many great and powerful deeds that he accomplished, we're told that he could not do many miracles because of the unbelief of people when he went certain places. If they did not have faith, he wasn't able to do much. As powerful as he is, unbelief is something that will cause the power of Elohim to shut down. So, just as a lesson, if you don't believe the word of the Creator, you cannot expect to receive anything from it. You must have faith, must believe, must trust. You know, lack of faith, not believing, can change everything. It can change your whole world from bad to worse. And that's what happened with our ancient ancestors. That's why they were in the wilderness 40 years. Now, the basis for them being in the wilderness is because of their unbelief. Elohim would not let them go into the land because they did not trust him. Now, initially, what Elohim wanted to do was to destroy all the people. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to kill them all. So I'm not painting a good, nice picture of Elohim because he wanted to kill all the people. This is the truth. Our Elohim decided, because the people did not believe him, because they did not trust him, because he knew they were rebellious people, he said, Moses, I want to wipe the people out, and I want to raise up the Israelites under you, through your seed. And Moses said, no, you don't want to do that. Here, can you believe it? Moses is telling Elohim.
Amen. Moses
is telling Elohim what he doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So Moshe says, if you do that, then what will the nations think? You know, the Most High could care less about what nations think.
Yeah.
He could care less about the perception of nations when it comes to what he wants to do.
Yeah.
You know, because he's sovereign, he knows all things. But I believe that he chose not to wipe the people out because of Moses' intercession. But the bottom line, though, ultimately, after 40 years, all of the people died in the wilderness, and they did not go into the land of promise. So ultimately, I hate to say it, he did what he wanted to do. Anyway. Now, while they were in this wilderness experience, and mind you, the 40-year wilderness experience was not Elohim's intention. You hear that? We can hear a lot of preaching on 40 years in the wilderness, that whole thing. That was not Elohim's intention. That was not, as some would say, the will of Elohim. No. That came as a result of the unbelief of the people. Okay? There are some things that people do not have to endure. If you believe, if you be obedient and have faith, you don't have to endure certain things. Okay? Now, while they were in the wilderness, we know that the Most High made provision. I had noted last week about the manna in the wilderness, and how the Almighty ensured that they would eat. One of the things I did not know has to do with how Elohim preserved their clothing. The clothes that they had, the Elohim preserved their clothing during the whole time they were in the wilderness. Can you imagine 40 years wearing the same clothes and the clothes did not wear out?
Amazing.
Can you imagine that? I mean, some of us, we may be able to hold on to our threads, maybe 5, 6, 10. I mean, I have some stuff I've had for about good 10, 15 years, but, I try to take care of my things. But 40 years wearing the same clothes daily. Because when they came out of the wilderness, you got to remember, when they came out of Egypt, all they had was the clothes that was on their backs. That was basically it.
Yeah.
And they went out. So he preserved the sandals on their feet, the shoes that they had on their feet.
Yeah.
And think about that. And they're walking in the desert. Walking in the desert. Same shoes. Now, look, I can probably keep a good pair of shoes, maybe a couple years, take care of them real good. But if I wear the shoes every day, they're not going to last a couple years.
Yeah.
Especially if I was to wear those same shoes hiking in the mountains or on rough terrain every day. No, those shoes would be tore up in about a good 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
But the Most High preserved their clothing, their shoes in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, as they were getting to the end of the 40-year period, there was something that happened. There are some prophecies that were spoken that mention blessings and cursings. And this is written in the book of Devarim. In the book of Devarim, which is commonly called Deuteronomy, the next generation of Israelites had come to the place where they were now getting ready to enter into the land of promise. The first generation of Israelites were dying off, and the Most High would not let them go into the land of promise. Now, as this next generation, the babies that were born to those who had came out of Egyptian captivity, they had grown up now. They were being taught the Torah, the commands of the Almighty. In the book of Devarim, in this book, Moshe reiterates the Torah to this new generation, these sons and daughters of the first generation of Israelites that came out of Egyptian captivity. And when we go to Devarim chapter 28, Moshe gives a list of blessings and also curses. And he tells them that if you obey Yahuwah and be obedient, keep his commandments, then all of the blessings will come upon you. I want to read the first verse so that you can get an idea of what Moses said. Now listen to this. This is what Moses said. If you will only obey Yahuwah your Elohim by diligently observing all his commandments that I am commanding you today, Yahuwah your Elohim will set you high above all the nations of the earth. all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey Yahuwah your Elohim. So here in the first two verses of Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 28, Moses informs this new generation that if they are obedient, if they diligently obey the commandments, that blessings will overtake you. And then he begins to list these barakot, these blessings. And in these blessings, there are provisions or promises that take care of all of the temporal needs of the people. This is so very important for us to understand, such as ensuring food, preserving the fruit of the womb, progeny, ensuring that if the Israelites are attacked by enemies, that Elohim will cause them to be dispersed. Ensuring that whatever the Israelites put their hands to, that Elohim would support it. He said that whatever you put your hands to, I will bless. So in this covenant, there are these blessings. And these blessings serve as a means of keeping the people in a disposition of well-being, keeping the people in shalom. Elohim even mentioned that he would remove sickness from among the people. So there's all of these blessings that Elohim says that are available in this covenant. However, when you look at the latter part, well, I don't even know if I can say the latter part of this chapter, because the first 15 verses of chapter 28 speak of the blessings. But from verse 16 through to verse 68, that's an overwhelming number of verses. You know, the first 15 verses out of 68 verses deal with blessings. From verse 16 to verse 68, all deal with curses. So when you get to verse 16, what happens is, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. At verse 15, the first 14 verses deal with blessings. At verse 15, it says this: but if you will not obey Yahuwah your Elohim by diligently observing all his commandments and decrees, which I am commanding you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. So now, here we have the opposite being noted, that if you don't be obedient to diligently keep the commandments, then curses will come. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. It's a lot to read. But I want to emphasize that contained within this section of the chapter 28, that you have information that prophesies curses, captivity, and a scattering of the Israelites among the nations. I'm going to say it again. In this portion of the chapter, you have curses, captivities, and scatterings that are prophesied in the latter part of the 28th chapter of Devarim. The curses that are mentioned entail sickness coming upon the Israelites, enemies overtaking the Israelites. It entails everything that is the opposite of the blessing. So whatever the blessing is, it is the complete opposite. Instead of the fruit of the womb being preserved, it won't be preserved. Instead of having food and grain preserved, that would not be preserved. Matter of fact, the Most High said you can go and plant a vineyard and somebody else is going to eat the fruit of your vineyard. It talks about captivities. It says that a nation from far will come and make you their slaves. I want to read something with reference to what would happen by other nations. I'm going to read verse 33, and I'm going to kind of jump around chapter 28 a little bit because I want us to get an idea of what has been noted in this section of scripture with regard to what would happen to the Israelites if they do not keep the commandments. I find this to be very important. And that is because when we look at this section, we're able to understand the rest of the future history of what happens to the house of Israel afterwards, once we understand the blessings and the curses. This is very important. And we don't always hear this dealt with in a class such as this. I mean, we could go through the history and talk about what happened at this particular point in time and that particular point in time, and, as we move along. But when we look at this chapter, we really begin to understand why certain things happen to the house of Israel. Because it all is based upon the obedience or disobedience of the Israelites with respect to the covenant with the Almighty. This is very important. So I'm going to read something here. I want to read verse 33. It says, "A people whom you do not know shall eat up the fruit of your ground and of all your labors. You shall be continually abused and crushed and driven mad by the sight that your eyes shall see. Yahuwah will strike you on the knees and on the legs with grievous boils, of which you cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head." That doesn't sound good at all, does it? Mm-hmm. This is part of the curses. Mm-hmm. Verse 36. "Yahuwah will bring you and the king whom you set over you to a nation that neither you nor your ancestors have known, where you shall serve other Elohim of wood and stone. And you shall become an object of horror, a proverb, and a byword among all the peoples where Yahuwah will lead you." Now, before I read any more, this is verse 36. I believe verse 36 right here is prophetic of the captivity of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians. The reason why I say that is because it says that Yahuwah will bring you and the king whom you set over you. We know that during the time of the divided kingdom, which we have not even covered yet, we know that during that time, they had kings. So when the text refers to the king being taken into captivity with the people, we know based upon the history that has already transpired, that's referring to the time of either the northern kingdom or the Babylonian kingdom. I believe that this particular point is dealing with the northern kingdom in particular. It could be dealing with the southern kingdom also, because with the southern kingdom, that king also went into captivity into Babylon. But that's my particular view at that point. Now I want to go to verse 49. Let's see. No, I'm going to read from verse 47. Then I'm going to read verse 49. Start at verse 47. And we're still in Deuteronomy or Devarim chapter 28. It says, because you did not serve Yahuwah your Elohim joyfully and with gladness of heart for the abundance of everything. So basically this is saying is that, you know, you didn't serve Elohim with joy and gladness for everything he did for you.
Yeah.
He said you didn't, because you didn't do that. It says, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom Yahuwah will send against you, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and lack of everything. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. Yahuwah will bring a nation from far away, from the end of the earth, to swoop down on you like an eagle, a nation whose language you do not understand, a grim-faced nation, showing no respect to the old or favor to the young. It shall consume the fruit of your livestock and the fruit of your ground until you are destroyed, leaving you neither grain, wine, and oil, nor increase of your cattle, and the issue of your flock until it has made you perish. It shall besiege you in all your towns until your high and fortified walls, in which you trusted, come down throughout your land. It shall besiege you in all your towns throughout the land that Yahuwah your Elohim has given you. In the desperate straits to which the enemy siege reduces you, I want you to listen to this. It says, you will eat the fruit of your womb and the flesh of your own sons and daughters, whom Yahuwah your Elohim has given you. So this is saying that a siege will come upon the people, and that as a result of the siege, the people living in the towns, when they are sieged, will begin to eat their own children. You hear this? Now, this right here is indicative of possibly two particular situations. Either the Babylonian captivity or the Romans coming in to besiege Jerusalem. One of those two, it fits them both, okay? Because in both instances, we have the city being sieged. So this prophecy, it deals with the situation of them coming and besieging them. Now, I would think that this prophecy here, especially in verse 49, I think that particular prophecy may refer to the Romans. I'm not sure, where it says that they will swoop down on you like an eagle. it says they will come from the end of the earth to swoop down on you. That appears to be referring to Rome. That's what it appears to refer to me. And there might be some elements in this particular verse here that might even refer to the future captivity, or future from the standpoint of when this was written, of the slavery that took place by the West African Israelites. Because it says things like, a nation whose language you do not understand. Okay, so when we read this, we're seeing elements of things there. One of the things that we do know about the Babylonians and also the Assyrians is that the Israelites that were living during the time of those captivities, they knew the language of the Assyrians, they knew the language of the Babylonians. Matter of fact, their language was very similar. There were Semitic languages. So when I look at this here, I kind of wonder, well, who is this referring to in verse 49? So those are just things that I'm throwing out there. But these prophecies can overlap as far as when it talks about the things that would take place, when it talks about the besieging of the towns, we know that that's definitely dealing with either the Babylonian captivity or the Romans coming in to besiege Jerusalem. One of those two, because that's the only time where our people have had the walls. It says the walls that you trust in. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, I want to continue reading, and I want to go to the 63rd verse, and I'm going to read verse 63 through to verse 68. And it says, and just as Yahuwah took delight in making you prosperous and numerous, so Yahuwah will take delight in bringing you to ruin and destruction. You shall be plucked off the land that you are entering to possess. So we know that that's definitely talking about the captivity that has to do with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. And then it says, Yahuwah will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other. And there you shall serve other Elohim of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Among those nations you shall find no ease, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There Yahuwah will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and a languishing spirit. Your life shall hang in doubt before you, night and day. You shall be in dread with no assurance of your life. No assurance of your life. This is a terrible situation that the Israelites would be in, being cursed. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening. And at evening you shall say, if only it were morning, because of the dread that your heart shall feel and the sights that your eyes shall see. Verse 68. Yahuwah will bring you back in ships to Egypt by a route that I promised you would never see again. And you shall be sold there to your enemies as male and female slaves, and no one shall buy you. That phrase, no one shall buy you, it's an idiom that refers to no one shall redeem you. Because what happens is that when the Israelites would go into this kind of slavery, there will be no redemption. Have you all heard about the kinsman redeemer? The kinsman redeemer is someone who is a relative that can go and redeem their relative if they are in a situation of bondage, whether it's debt because of things that a person may owe, and they have to deal with the consequences of being in debt. Someone can pay that debt and get them out of their situation of bondage. Well, this type of a circumstance that we're reading about prophetically, it says that Yahuwah will bring you back to Egypt in ships. Now, the Most High said they were never going to go back to Egypt. But the word Egypt, or Mitzrayim, is the more appropriate word. Mitzrayim is the Hebrew word. The word Mitzrayim means house of bondage or place of constraints. That's what the name Mitzrayim means, place of constraint. So you know when we're reading the scripture and it says Mitzrayim, and then following that it'll say the house of bondage. That's the actual definition of that name, house of bondage. So what Elohim is saying is that his people are going to go back into bondage in ships. This is interesting. And that when they go to this place of bondage, it says that they will be sold there to their enemies as male and female slaves, and no one would buy them or redeem them. Now, this particular verse, I personally believe, is a verse that deals with a captivity that took place somewhere around about the 1500s, where there were European nations that came into the region of what we call West Africa, which is where the Israelites, many of the Israelites had migrated to, and they were taken as slaves and scattered throughout many of the nations of the earth. So when we look at verses 16 through 68, we have this large span of prophecy that deals with what would happen to the Israelites if they disobey Elohim. And the reason why this is noted is because this new generation is about to go into the land of promise. They're about to take the land, and they're going to go in that land and hopefully be obedient to the Almighty. Moshe is telling them, listen, when you go into this land, be obedient. Be obedient. Do what you're supposed to do. But if you don't do what you're supposed to do, while you are enjoying this rich land that Elohim has promised to you, you're not going to be blessed. The opposite of blessing is going to come up on your life. You'll be cursed. Another people will come and take you out of the land, and there will be continual scattering and captivities that will happen to you. This is what Elohim said would happen to the Israelites. So now that we've seen this prophetic picture based upon the people not being obedient. Now, they hadn't yet gone into obedience yet, not at this particular time, but we already know that they will. We know that. We know that they will. But right here is where we have the prophetic layout. And this prophetic layout, it really helps us to understand, who many of the Israelites are that are scattered around the world. when you start to think about, well, who are these people that have gone through all this stuff? Who are they? More than likely, when you begin to start looking at people groups all over the world that are dealing with this type of situation, this kind of life, listen to this. Listen to what it says. It says that there will be no assurance of life. Your life will hang in doubt before you. Night and day you shall be in dread. There are a lot of people in the world who are in this type of situation. And 9 times out of 10, if you really go and investigate the history of those peoples who may have different names upon them ethnically, when you really begin to dig out the history of these peoples and where they may have came from, when you look at the historical migrations, you'll find that indeed they are Israelites. Just want to make mention of that. Now I'm going to move real quickly down through this history. We need to know that Moses was not allowed to go into the land of Canaan. Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 31, verses 1 and 2 is where we discover that Moses is not going to go. Moses says, let's look at chapter 31, verse 1. When Moses had finished speaking all these words to the Israelites, now all these words included chapter 28, 29, and 30. Moses was laying out all of this to the second generation that's about to get ready to go into the land. He was wanting to prepare them. Y'all see that? He was wanting to prepare them. He's telling them, look, be obedient. Get ready. You're going to go into this land. Then Moses says, I am now 120 years old. I am no longer able to get about. And Yahuwah has told me, you shall not cross over this Jordan. Yahuwah did not let Moses go over into the land of Canaan. And there's a reason why. Moses did not obey Elohim in speaking to the rock so that the people can get water. He was supposed to tell the rock, to bring forth. And Moses hit the rock with his staff. And Elohim said, I didn't tell you to do that.
Wow.
So you can't go in. That's the reason why. So now there's a transition of leadership that has to take place here. Joshua, who was one of the 12 spies that went into the land of Canaan, he was the one, he and Caleb, that had faith and believed that Elohim would give them the land. Well, he was Moshe's minister or servant. He was the one that assisted Moshe. And so Joshua now becomes the leader of the congregation of Israel. Under Joshua's leadership, the people go into the land of Canaan. And now, in the book of Joshua is where we have that history of all of the exploits of Joshua and how they went into the land of Canaan and they conquered different nations and were able to take the land. And during this period of time, the Israelites were able to obtain a good part of the land and have success. However, there were some tribes that had a little difficulty in being able to obtain their area. The tribe of Dan was one of those tribes that had difficulty securing their inheritance. So what Dan chose to do, Dan chose to go up north to Laish and to take that territory. So Dan had two areas. He had Laish and also a portion of the ancestral land that was given to him. Now, something that I want us to look at with respect to the Israelites, and this is just to show us how Elohim has favored the house of Israel. Okay, this is very important. But when we look at Devarim chapter 32, verse 8, check this out. Devarim chapter 32, verse 8. And this is what it says. It says, when the Most High apportioned the nations, it says, when he divided mankind, he fixed the boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. So what this is saying, now Moses is prophesying here. But in this verse, Moses is telling us that when the Almighty divided the nations of men, now the division of the nations, the 70 nations among men, that goes all the way back to the time of Noah. When he began to divide the nations and set boundaries for the nations, he did it according to the number of the sons of Israel, or the children of Israel. So everything that has to do with how the Almighty arranged things among the nations, he did it in mind of the covenant people. And the reason why is because he already saw the end, or determined the end at the beginning, that the house of Israel would be the leading nation among all nations of the earth. You hear that? I'll read it again. When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided mankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. All right. So we want to remember that Elohim's dealings in the earth, Elohim's management of things in the earth is built around the house of Israel. I share this because I want us to be in remembrance of the fact that Israel shall always be a people unto Elohim in the earth. And not only shall it always be a people unto Elohim in the earth, I mean, he said that because he wanted his people to understand their significance. But in the fixing up of things among the nations, it's all based upon the number of the sons of Israel. So I find these things noted in scripture as being very, very important. All right. So now Joshua becomes the leader. They go in, they take the land, and they aren't able to have complete control, but they move in, they do their best. After Joshua dies, we have another period, the period of the Shoftim. The term Shoftim means judges. We have the period of the judges that show up. Now, what I want to do, because time is getting away, what I want to do is list the names of the judges so that we can have an idea of who they were. And on next, or in our next teaching, we'll say a little bit more about the judges as we get into the kings. But the first judge is Othniel. Othniel. This is after Joshua's gone. Joshua's left the scene. We have Othniel, which is a Shaphat. Shaphat is a judge. That's the singular term for judge. Othniel was Caleb's younger brother. Now, I find something very significant about Othniel and Elohim raising up Othniel to lead the people. And the reason why I say that is because Othniel was not a blood descendant Israelite. Othniel was a Kenizzite. This is interesting. Think about it. You would think or assume, as many assume so oftentimes, that when Elohim is raising up leadership among his people, that he would use only blood descendant Israelites. People think that way, right? Now we know with reference to those who will be kings, because of the prophecies are fixed in such a way where the kings that will have a perpetual line must come through the tribe of Yahuwah. That's because prophecy is fixed as such. But the possibility of being a leader in Israel is not limited, or it's not based solely on ethnicity. Here we have Othniel, who is the first Shaphat, or first judge in Israel, and he is not a blood descendant of Jacob. Now, the Kenizzites, he's a Kenizzite. Now, the Kenizzites come from Esau's line. Y'all hear me? It comes from Esau's line. So Othniel is a descendant of Abraham and Isaac, but not of Jacob. Okay? So he's not a blood descendant Israelite. The Israelites come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yaakov. But Othniel is a member of the house of Israel by covenant. He joined the Israelites. He followed the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. His brother, Caleb, had a prominent position in Yahuwah. His brother, Caleb, was the chieftain of the tribe of Judah. So we see here that Elohim didn't have no problem with using someone in Israel that may not have been a blood descendant. Now, the reason why it's important that we understand that is so that we have to begin to see things the way Elohim sees things. Now, in the Torah, Elohim made a statement and he said that the person who is coming in, a person who takes the covenant, shall be to me. He said, the stranger who embraces his covenant shall be to me just like one who is native born in Israel, as an Israelite. So from the standpoint of Elohim, if a person becomes an Israelite by covenant, Elohim sees them exactly the same as someone who is a blood descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So if Elohim sees a person who is of the nations coming in as a convert, we should also see them the same way. Problem has been in the history of our ancestors that they have not always done that. Hopefully, on this side, we'll do a better job and embrace everyone who comes in to Zion. If we're to be like Elohim, that's how we're to see people who come in. So we have this man, Othniel, Caleb's younger brother, who's a Kenizzite, who is the first judge. We see sovereignty of Elohim in all of this. See that? Elohim does what he wants to do. Elohim don't care about, your pedigree or your this or your that. All Elohim cares about is, are you willing to be obedient to my ways? That's all he cares about. Hey, look, the whole reason why the Most High chose Abram, that's what his name was at first. The whole reason why the Most High chose Abram was because Abram had faith in Elohim while most of the population of the world at that time was following the religion that Nimrod had introduced. You know? So when we see how Elohim works, Elohim is all about, are you going to follow me? Okay, you're going to follow me? I'll bless you. I'll make you great. I'll use your life. So here we have Othniel. And here we have another man. The second judge, his name is Ehud. Ehud. Ehud is a left-handed man. This is what's different about this brother, I mean, it's like the world has been so right-hand oriented for ages, for millennia. Here we have a left-handed man who is used by Elohim as a judge. The third judge, guess what? It's a woman. A woman leader? Yeah, a woman. Her name is Devorah. She was a prophetess. The Most High used her, and she judged Israel 40 years. She led them 40 years. We see the sovereignty of Elohim in all of this. Yeah. There are many in our day that don't believe that Elohim can use a woman to be led by the Ruach to guide his people. Elohim is like, if I'm the one that's guiding the person, you better listen. Because when Elohim is doing the work, whatever vessel Elohim chooses to use, we have to follow. That's what's important. Elohim is sovereign, and he shows us his sovereignty when we look at these judges. The next judge, his name is Gideon. Gideon is an interesting one because when the Most High called Gideon, guess what Gideon was doing? Gideon was hiding in a wine press. He was hiding in a wine press. The reason why is because the enemies of Israel were oppressing them. They were coming in. They were taking their food and their crops. And Gideon, he was hiding in a wine press. He was scared. And what is interesting, and I found this to be very interesting about how Elohim works and how words are very important, is that the angel shows up to him and he calls him, "You mighty man of valor." That's what he says to him. He's hiding. Now, listen to this. He's hiding in a wine press. And he is called a mighty man of valor. He wasn't doing what a mighty man of valor normally does.
Yep.
He's being a coward.
Yep.
He's hiding, but he is called a mighty man of valor. What's interesting to me is that when the Most High wants to use someone's life, he oftentimes will speak a word over them that is not necessarily what they are demonstrating, because he wants to bring that out of a person. You know, and this is what we begin to learn from the history and how Elohim works through the history. The next judge, his name is Jephthah. Now, this Jephthah, he was a son of a harlot. This is some real interesting stuff. It's like the people whom most probably would not think would be raised up to be leaders are raised up to be leaders.
Yeah.
These are the ones that Elohim chooses.
Amen.
All right. Now there are 5 other judges, and I'm just going to list their names and wrap this up. We have Ibzan, we have Elon, we have Abdon, we have Samson. Most of us are familiar about Samson and his great strength, and he had his host of failures. And then the last judge, who's also a priest, and I believe he was the greatest of all the judges and the great prophet, is Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to wrap it up at that point. In our next lesson, we will get more into detail about Samuel. Any questions? Let us pray. Abba Yah, we do thank you for this time that we've been able to share and provide this lesson. I trust that it has helped your people, that it has enlightened and informed them, that it has caused them to understand your work, your prophetic work, your activity among your house, that it has helped us to be able to see how you have orchestrated all things according to your divine plan. I pray, Abba, that you would strengthen your people, that you would build up your people and give them the insight that they need to be effective in your work. I do thank you. May you be glorified in the mighty name of Yahshua. Amen. Well, we thank each one of you who have attended today. And those of you who are watching by live stream, we appreciate your attendance. We'd like to encourage you to give as unto the Almighty. When you give and sow, you give as unto the Most High, and you assist this work of Elohim to continue doing what it is doing, to provide the teaching of the Most High to the nations, and to help instruct and build up Zion and help to develop spiritual leaders. You can go to our website at www.ncmmi.20m.com, and you can share as you're led of the Almighty. Also, you can share by Cash App. Our Cash App code is $NCMMI. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending, and I hope that the lessons are encouraging, insightful, and informative. May the Most High bless you and your families. Shalom.